Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about pot brownies, also foster care in the state of Oregon, and the FBI is going to be empowered to snoop into your internet records without a court order. More coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And you have tuned into episode 168 of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
We have a lot to get into, Nick. We are going to be discussing marijuana, a couple of different stories on it. It's becoming double illegal on the federal level. We'll be talking about what exactly that means, as well as marijuana dispensary, medical marijuana dispensary in California, where a handicapped man in a wheelchair is finding himself in hot water because his medical marijuana shop is not handicap accessible. Yet he gets in it with a wheelchair every single day. We'll be discussing those stories. But first, I wanted to talk about it's a sad and pitiful case of foster care and how the whole system is just sometimes screwed up. Now, I don't want to down the entire system, because I understand that foster care can really be good for some people in some really broken homes, but my uncle and aunt are foster care parents, and so I don't want to throw this blanket statement out that all foster care is horrible, ripping kids from their families, but there's a reason it has that kind of a reputation, and it's cases like this coming out of Oregon where a woman is being sued by the state of Oregon to pay back foster care charges. Now, while this is a common thing to happen in Oregon, the case is kind of screwed up, and it sounds like she should be the one suing Oregon, not the other way around. This is coming from Oregon, but also taking place in Canada, where the Oregon government is suing a Calgary mother for the cost of keeping her son in foster care for 2 years while she fought tooth and nail the entire time to get him back. Well, how did he land in foster care? Well, the boy, who's now 12, 10 when he was taken from his mother, was visiting his stepfather in Oregon across the border. That imaginary border in the sand that separates the two countries. Well,
It's more like in the prairie.
In the prairie.
There's too much sand there.
Well, they crossed the border and gave him to the stepfather, and well, things went bad from there because the police caught him riding his bicycle without a helmet. And while they did bring him back to his stepfather's house, they decided he wasn't a legal guardian. They didn't recognize that. He's from Canada, stepfather doesn't have legal guardian rights, so they took him. And rather than communicate with his mother in Canada in a nice, orderly, humane fashion, they decided to keep the boy and let the mother go through courts and courts and courts for 2 full years, missing out on 2 full years of her son's development. She wasn't a bad mother, yet they took her anyways because of guardianship rules and state rules and lines in the sand. And now the mother is being sued for recouping medical, food, shelter costs, thousands and thousands of dollars for her being apart from her son. Not to mention she's got, legal fees that she had to fight with for 2 years as well. So Nick, I gotta say, why do they do this? How can these boneheaded bureaucrats screw up this badly? Don't they know what they're doing for all the foster kids?
And then they sue somebody.
Right, but this one story, there might be good foster homes out there. I know they exist. I know some people who operate because there are some broken families. Sometimes kids do need a place to go, and sometimes foster homes work. But it's cases like this that make it, to throw the whole blanket statement out there, to be like foster care is awful.
Yeah, well, you have to remember that foster care is provided by families, and most foster care families are probably good. I'm sure not all of them are. But the system itself is administrated by bureaucrats or people working for government. And when they screw up, a lot of times if you screw up in a bureaucracy, it doesn't pay to admit your mistake. I guess what they're trying to do here is to basically cast the spotlight off of them. I guess that's what they were trying to do initially. Obviously, it backfired in this case because this got tons of publicity, very negative publicity for the state of Oregon and their foster care system. But what they might have been trying to do was cover up the fact that they made a really terrible mistake, and by charging the mother for all the services that they provided to her son.
It seems crazy because in a sense, I'm not a parent, but if I was, I can imagine how horrible it would be to have your child not only taken away, but taken away in another country. I get they're right next to each other. Oregon's touching Canada, but to be that separated apart, I mean, it just seems awful to me that bureaucrats could do this to people.
Yeah, it's very.
Is it something like you put on your bureaucrat suit and you no longer empathize with human emotion?
Yeah, I mean, when you consider the fact that there was no abuse or anything heinous taking place here, it was just basically paperwork. I mean, it was paperwork issues and just bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy. And apparently the people working for the state of Oregon don't care about splitting up a family for years for the sake of filling out their precious paperwork. And I think that's what it boils down to. I mean, I think it's a system, government systems are largely, they're not designed to care. They're designed to govern people. And governing people is really done with a stick. I mean, that's what the purpose, if they didn't use force against people, it wouldn't be government, it'd be a business. They do use force against people, so they don't have to worry about keeping you particularly happy.
But they don't have to, Nick. You know, I know the system, put it frankly, sucks. It's not a good system of government. No system of government is good. But since we have it, and since we're stuck with it for now, can't the bureaucrats at least be reasonable and nice? As many of them are. I get it. Some people disagree or agree on how many bureaucrats we should have. But why not be nice? You're getting a paycheck. Not that bad. You have benefits. Why not be nice?
In many cases, it's a lot better than people in the private sector right now. I mean, you're probably a lot safer working for government right now than you are in a private sector job where businesses are actually trying to cut costs. When it comes to government jobs, they're really not cutting in the same way that private industry is. So you should be, seems like you should be tickled pink to work for government right now.
Yeah.
The rest of us get to pay for it, and you get great benefits and probably reasonable pay.
Yeah. So at least smile and be reasonable. I mean,
just be nice to the rest of us.
Don't split up families because of fate.
Whether the rest of us want to or not, I mean, regardless of what you think about the role of government, regardless of what you think about paying your taxes, we're basically forced to pay for you guys to work for government, whether we want to or not. So you might as well be nice to us because we are, we do pay your paycheck. But see, that's the problem is, it's not like customers at a business where they care because we're forced to, whether we like it or not.
But people who want zero government, absolutely no government, anarchy, and I know there's a lot of them who watch this show who think that we're huge government freaks because we want a smaller form of government. And then there's people on the other side who think we're freaks because we want such a small form of government. It's stories like this, though, that really point to the fact that, well, we'd be better off without the government because we wouldn't have bureaucrats screwing this up. I'm not saying that I want that, though. I'm just throwing it out there. For the bureaucrats who do watch this show, and I know you watch, be nice and be reasonable, and that's all. Public service announcement. Anyways, I'm normally much harsher, right? So I figure I'd water it down a bit for today. We'll see how the commenters like that. Anyways, we do need to move on. This is a story. The next one coming up, no water on this one, man. This one is scary. It's almost scary to talk about because I know I'm going to be on the list just for talking about it and putting it in the headlines. And it has to do with broad new powers, or I guess old powers they've had and new ones they'll be gaining, of the FBI.
The FBI.
Now, we've talked about this story before, but I never knew how insidious and huge it was. Creepy. It shivers up the spine.
It has to do with what the FBI is going to be able to get as far as information on you without a court order whatsoever. And if you're remembering from high school civics class, and that high school civics class took place not in the last 5 or 10 years, then you probably remember that back then in the United States, you generally needed a court order, a warrant to seize information on people, search through their records. It's a new world we're living in since 2001. And obviously, a lot of the protections in the Constitution, they've been ignored. There have been end runs around them. And there were a lot of violations before that, but it's gotten a lot worse. And the Obama administration is doing nothing to protect your civil liberties. So this is an article that a lot of you who voted for Obama hoping he would restore some of the civil liberties lost under the Bush administration, well, you might want to take note because this story is not an isolated incident, and it points out that the Obama administration is overseeing a regime, an administration that's worse on civil liberties than the Bush administration was. So what were you voting for? What did you gain? The Obama administration is seeking to make it easier for the FBI to compel companies to turn over records of an individual's internet activity without a court order if agents deem the information relevant to a terrorism or intelligence investigation and there's no judicial review, so it's up to the agents. the FBI can issue their own paperwork to search your effects. It'd be like if police officers on the street could decide whether or not they had enough cause to search your car, and they didn't have to go before a judge to get a warrant, which really isn't that hard to do if you have decent evidence. But now if they just have a whim that they want to search your internet records, they can do that.
Nick,
without
this is interesting because when we reported on this story, or at least this line of story 3 years ago, it was the rubber stamp judges that we were mad about. The judges who just, yeah, sure, it comes through, court order, yes, search, search, search. Essentially, they had a rubber stamp, and all you had to do is show it to a judge, and then you could search through someone's effects, papers, internet activity, etc.
Right, you're right. We were talking about like the FISA court. And
right,
like
how it's
that,
so ridiculous how easy
court,
it is.
It's not a public court. It's not a
but
public
at least there was still a judge in one of those pillars of government, the 3 pillars of government. At least there was still a supposed check and balance, even though it was just a pass.
Yeah.
This is crazy because it's completely taking away that whole pillar of government and just saying it's at the discretion of an individual agent
who works for the executive
That's
branch.
it.
Yeah, it's great when you have executive branches that check themselves, because that worked out so well in countries like Chile, where they had.
It is a brave new world. This is such a huge shift, and I know it. In fact, it's going to mean almost the same thing, but it's a total shift away from where we're supposed to be.
It's a fundamental assault on a form of government.
We're going to still be. I mean, let's face it. We were being spied on whenever the government wanted before. But now they're saying, yes, it's okay. they're admitting it, essentially.
Yeah, it's been progressive. I mean, even under the Bush administration, there were sneak and peek searches and other warrantless searches that were approved. But let's get into what this new it's not legislation even, it's not even approved by Congress. It's the administration looking to make it easier for themselves to spy on you. The administration wants to add just 4 words, electronic communication transactional records, to a list of items the law says the FBI may demand without a judge's approval. Government lawyers say this category of information includes the addresses to which an internet user sends email, the times and dates email was sent and received, and possibly a user's browser history, which would be all the websites you visited. And a browser history can get pretty specific, so it can show what page on a website you've been looking at. It does not include, the lawyers hasten to point out, the content of the email or other internet communication. But with a URL, with the website, if it's specific enough, you can find exactly, if it's a public website, you can find exactly what the user was looking at.
Right,
so it's no different than looking at the content.
It's also a fishing expedition. You go and you find that they were on a specific website. Well, there's your power to go get your rubber stamp from the judge, and then you can look at the specific emails. So it is pretty insidious because it allows for these rubber stamps to go through absolutely no problem. And I want to reiterate to people out there who, like Nick said, even myself included on this one, I didn't think the Obama administration would be this bad. I thought they'd just keep all the powers that the Bush administration have. But this is leaps and bounds ahead of that. Yeah. And I just want to point that out for all you Obama fans out there. I mean, they went even further than we thought they would go at this point. And they're not even halfway through.
No, not even halfway through with one term if he gets another one. So we're not even a quarter way through this administration. Not that the next one will be any better. It'll probably just continue to get worse from here. I wanted to point out that the mechanism that they're going to be using, there'll still be an official process to grant the ability to get these records, but the FBI field office in a particular region will be able to do it on their own. It won't be a court. And they'll be issuing national security letters, which are basically letters that tell people like internet service providers that they have to hand over certain information on what a particular individual, what websites they visited, what emails they have sent, and it's secret. The ISP is prohibited by law, or at least by what they're calling law here. They're forced to keep that information secret. They can't disclose it to the individual. They can't disclose it. I think in some cases we've even run into people have been told that they cannot speak to a lawyer when they've received a national security letter. And originally I thought national security letters were relatively rare. When we first started reporting on them, it sounded like
a handful.
Right. It sounded like there was a potential for abuse, but there might be a few hundred, maybe a few thousand issued. The Justice Department issued 192,000 plus national security letters between 2003 and 2006, according to a report that came out in 2008 from the Inspector General's Department. And
how do they have time to
that's
do
in
that?
3 years. I assume it's gotten worse. So you can only imagine if it has gotten worse, they're issuing many tens of thousands of these every year. Even if they're on pace.
If there's been a couple on myself or you, or maybe even you. I mean,
yeah, you don't know.
And you'll never
It's secret.
know unless the hammer actually comes down and they decide to drag you in for something.
Right, but there's no burden. I mean,
It chills up my spine.
this evidence is going to be admissible, apparently. So if they do go on a fishing expedition and they find claiming that they're involved in a terrorism or intelligence investigation, what does that exactly mean? I mean, are they going to be able to use it for just charge you with any particular offense that they happen to find? There's so many laws on the books, on the Federal Register. I'm sure there are a lot of you out there, you might think you don't break any laws, but it's very easy to commit a federal offense, a felony. Like, there's certain things you can't do with cell phone batteries. You can't bring them on planes and things. They're actually offenses. Like, I guess you have to label them properly when you ship them. Who knew that? Ever shipped a cell phone with a battery in it, haven't labeled it properly? I'm pretty sure that's a federal offense. So there's all kinds of federal laws out there that can land you in prison. Doesn't mean you're a terrorist or a spy.
That's what's so creepy. Even if, I mean, we talk a talk on this show, and that's what we do wrong by the media. I mean, I don't have any skeletons in my closet that I know of short of this show. I try to follow the laws. I'm not into civil disobedience personally. I like to talk about ideas and work within the system personally. But it creeps me out, Nick. Even though I'm not doing anything wrong, it creeps, yeah.
They'll make something up if they can't find something. But first they'll try to find something.
Those federal ones, like I said, the local bureaucrats, I like them to just smile. These ones, I want them to go away forever. They're bad, bad people.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to get a letter for that one.
Yeah, and I want to point out that this is new as far as the internet activity goes, and it is quite a bit more invasive because you can get like the actual websites you're visiting, things like that. But the FBI is justifying this by saying that this is the functional equivalent of telephone toll billing records, which they could already obtain. So the FBI could already see who you are calling, who is calling you. They might not be able to actually get the content of the conversations, but they can get the exact time that phone calls are made and their duration. They might not be able to prove, they might not be able to meet a burden of proof that you are talking to a particular person if they ever went to trial with it, but they can certainly fish for information.
And then get that warrant.
There's no limit from the judicial system here. It's not that hard to get a warrant. Judges will issue warrants in the middle of the night if they need to. And we're living in an age where there are cell phones, there is instant communication. It's not like a federal judge cannot be woken up in the middle of the night if there's a pressing, a time-sensitive issue that relates to national security. It's easier now, far easier to get a warrant than it was at the time of America's founding. So if you're trying to justify it saying, oh, well, we can't wait. We live in a world where timescales are very short. Well, yes, that's true. But during colonial times, you couldn't just call a judge up on the phone. If you needed to obtain a warrant to search somebody's home, you actually had to walk all the way to the judge's house. And in many cases, court districts were pretty large, so it could take you hours, a day. It could take a long time to get a warrant. These days, it's not going to take the FBI any time to get a warrant. This is just an excuse to snoop in our emails and our phone records, in as much as they can. They won't stop. I mean, they're not going to stop of their own accord.
Well, it's weird.
No intelligence or police agency has ever stopped of their own accord.
Since this is an executive order and it's not a law being made by Congress, how could the Supreme Court even rule it unconstitutional?
They could rule that the FBI is violating people's constitutional protections, and they could, I guess, they could strike it down. There was a ruling by, I think it was the Office of Legal, the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, whose opinions are binding on the executive branch, made a ruling on this. But that's binding within the executive branch. This isn't an act of legislation. This This is executive orders and rules.
Which is
But-
unconstitutional in of itself. I mean,
Well, executive, no. I mean, the president can give orders to the
broad
executive
sweeping
branch.
powers to say you no longer
Essentially-
need a search warrant to search someone's papers
Yeah.
and effects. I don't think you
An
can do that,
executive
Nick.
order in and of itself is constitutional. Legislating, having the executive branch legislate and practice law
All right.
and act as their
Nick,
own check and balance.
This conversation's
is not.
creeping me out, man. We're gonna have to move on. We're out of time for it. But anyways, the whole idea of it makes me feel icky. I'm gonna have to go home and shower. I want a story that I can rant and rave about, Nick, because there's plenty of those out there too. I want one that I can just get fired up about and not creeped out about this. This is what the government, the federal government's doing about pot brownies. Oh yeah, by the way, we can't take a break. That went too far, out of break time. Let's talk about pot brownies and how they're now going to be double illegal, at least on the federal level. If this bill gets all the way to the president's desk and signed into law, which I'm pretty confident it will, it flied through the Senate unanimously. Not a single nay on the federal level. The Saving Kids from Dangerous Drugs Act of 2009, which passed the Senate unanimously on Friday, includes language that could make fines and jail time for cooking and distributing pot brownies double those for possessing uncooked marijuana. The text of the bill says it's illegal to combine any marijuana with candy and market or package it in something that looks similar to a candy or sweet product, or modified by flavoring or coloring the controlled substance.
But
with
that
intent.
doesn't. I mean, that includes cooking it in anything, doesn't it?
I guess you're not allowed to
Flavoring or
cook.
coloring. I mean, it's not just brownies.
According to the bill, no cooking of the stuff to make it look like something that could be appealing to the children. Now, while this is just stupid on the federal government's part and all sorts of things we're going to talk about, the major issue here is that it also contains language in the bill that will make medical marijuana patients susceptible to being jailed for this, as well as the distributors. And a lot of those are cancer patients who can't smoke cannabis, medical marijuana, and they use it as their medicine, thousands and thousands of them. They ingest it through candy products, brownies, etc., and now they could be facing double jail times for that. So,
Federal prison sentences, which are.
but it's in the name of the kids, Nick. You know how
Well,
those kiddies,
yeah.
those teenagers, they really like to suck on. They think that candy products are so
who
cool that if
does
you have
this?
a brownie,
Who
it's now
does
much better.
this?
Let
I
me
mean,
hear,
is
folks.
it-
Okay, we're talking. Everybody who's intelligent out there, Nick, understands this. So I'm going to just put this for the dummies who think
Well,
that you're
either-
actually
either
marketing
that
to
or
kids.
You were in high school. You're an old person. You were in high school so long.
Hasn't
ago
been that long.
Marijuana wasn't.
Right.
You know.
Rick, can I have the one shot real
Gotcha.
quick? This is for the dummies out there who think that this is really going to protect the kids. Teenagers don't think candy's cool. They think smoking is cool. You're not going to stop kids from smoking marijuana or ingesting drugs by making candy products illegal. That's not what teenagers think are cool. Morons, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, really.
What are they
Teens are-
trying to do? All this is going to affect, the people that this is going to affect are sick and dying patients who need to ingest marijuana cooked because they can't smoke it because they have
It seems
cancer
very
or
difficult.
AIDS or something
I mean, how
like that.
enforceable is this either?
Very to medical marijuana products.
right,
Nick.
right.
This is a way to
But-
crack down on the medical marijuana clinics who are selling brownies
There are
and stuff
not
to
drug
sick
dealers
people.
out there, not
No.
serious drug dealers
No.
out there who are cooking marijuana, a relatively small amount, into brownies.
It's very
and then-
expensive.
well, and think about it. Why would you? It's bulky. Why would you go through the trouble of transporting the finished product? If your customers want pot brownies, you're just going to sell them the pot because they can buy brownie mix. You're not going to carry around pounds and pounds of marijuana brownies that's mostly brownies.
it's because
you're just going to sell them the pot.
The old people who passed this
Right, but
legislation, they have such old hair
Well, no.
that they don't understand this stuff.
It's that, and it's a backdoor way to crack down on
the
medical
medical
marijuana dispensaries.
It's so horrible, though,
Because
you're
the dispensaries
hurting
that
sick
are
people.
Well, it's going to go after the sick people, but it sounds like the law is mostly intended to go
dispensaries.
after go after people
The
who
way
are
it's wording
cooking
is
this
possession alone.
or
but-
distributing this. It sounds like they're going to try. The Obama administration said that they would not crack down. They would try to reverse the situation where you've got the DEA raiding medical marijuana dispensaries in states where either the state legislature or the people have made medical marijuana legal under state law. But now they're not cracking down on that. They're just keeping kids safe from candy pot.
Yeah, well, these medical marijuana dispensaries are marketing to children, so of course we need to crack down on them. The ones who are legit, the ones who are selling regular cannabis, they're fine. But the ones who... I want to shake them, Nick. Anyways, we do need to move on. We did plug it, so we've got to get into this one other story. I mean, this bill, we'll see. We'll report on it if it does go into law, but which it will. But we do have one medical marijuana story I want to cover really quickly because it's just so sad and pathetic. I mean, while we're talking about marijuana here, how some people just really don't want them and they'll do anything to stop them. You've got about 2 minutes now.
Yeah, it also gets down to regulations on businesses. It's not strictly a marijuana issue. This could be any number of things, but it's happening largely because this is a marijuana dispensary. Greg Shope knows what it's like to be disabled. He's the owner of Crown Lock and Hardware on Balboa Street in San Francisco. He's been in a wheelchair for almost 30 years. He was shot by somebody who broke into his home 30 years ago. He's been in a wheelchair since then. Now, he's been trying to open up a medical marijuana dispensary for well over a year. He's filled out the business permits. Every piece of government paperwork, whether it's for the dispensary or for just regular business, has been approved. But the mayor's Office of Disability, which doesn't review any other businesses except for medical marijuana facilities, and has much more stringent standards than just the regular disability rules that apply in the city of San Francisco, is preventing him from opening up, saying that the handicap access to this property is not sufficient. They even go so far as to, I guess with these dispensaries, they're responsible for maintaining the sidewalk, which is, as far as I know, city property in most places. They have to make sure that that is sufficiently handicap accessible. You're also talking about San Francisco, which is extremely hilly, so it's not like the city is really handicapped.
And in this particular place, they're on a 3% grade. It's nothing.
Yeah, the ramp.
The guy gets in there, he's in a wheelchair, it's fine. But it's just another backdoor way to shut him down. Anyways, that is going to do it for us. Are you someone who will agree with these people? Sick patients should not be allowed to ingest the medicine they and their doctors recommend for them. We'd love to hear from you. You've been hiding out there. We'd love a drug warrior who hates sick people. fmtv@freemindsmedia.org is the email address, or you can contact us on our website, freemindsmedia.org. Until next week, it has been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a good one.
This is Ridley, an indie journalist with ironclad credibility, a strong work ethic, and a head. Covering Liberty news around New Hampshire. He loves his advertisers. He knows to take pretty pictures, and pretty pictures. He does not know what you want him to do, but if practical, he will do it. And you will watch. Ridley Report, something, Ridley Report.